political candidates, the way they were picked, were they would go in front of the church, and the pastors would recommend to the congregation who to elect based on who most followed their code. Well, it's thanks to the 501c3, churches can no longer do that. It's funny, when our country was originally founded, it was a very Christian nation, and the only people who did endorse candidates were churches, and now they're the only ones who can't. And God was very much a part of our country when it first started, and look at how much it thrived. Now we've taken God out, and look at the result. We're $16 trillion in debt. We're over 20 trillion in debt, and we got shootings everywhere. We got, ISIS, attacking us, and, it's really crazy. And looking at this 2016 election, I see a lot of people, especially Christians, that look at both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and say, gosh, you know what? I just really don't like either one of them. I just can't really get behind either one of those ideas, and I understand that. I really, really do. But understand one thing here. I'm not necessarily endorsing a person. I'm endorsing an idea. See, if you find both of these people dislikable, don't invite either one of them over for dinner. That's, perfectly fine and acceptable. I'm not suggesting I will invite either one of them over for dinner. But it's not about the who. It's about the what. The what. Let me explain. And this is an important election because we're making a choice here between what God wants and are we going to go towards, the book of Revelations. And let me explain to you. We have one candidate who goes around saying, we're stronger together. Who wants all these, deals with all these countries all around the world, and wants all these deals of peace, and says, we're stronger together and all that. That sounds good on the surface. It really does. Who doesn't want world peace? Except one problem. If you read the book of Revelation, when you talk about the Antichrist, you will see that the Antichrist is someone that's not going to be seen as evil and terrible. He's going to be one that it's all about world peace and bringing the world together and having one world government, one world currency, quote unquote, the New World Order. Now, we've heard several presidents in the past mention the New World Order, starting with George Bush, the first one. Bill Clinton uttered the words, so did the second George Bush, so did Obama. And now, we have this candidate now who wants to continue with what the current president has done with a lot of the globalization policies. And that's what globalization is. It's a step towards, the New World Order. So when she talks about stronger together, yeah, it sounds good. Except for, is that God's plan? Well, let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at what it says in Revelations 13.4. And this is after the idea, after the whole world is together, of one world government. It says, Revelation 13.4. It says, and they worshiped the dragon, for he had given the authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, who is like the beast and who can fight against it. So in other words, the beast is serving as the god. And as I was saying, it's going to be someone that symbolizes world peace. Let's skip ahead to 13.8. and all who dwell on the earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation in the world book of life of the Sim of Lamb who was slain. So in other words, if you're not saved at that point in time, you're worshiping that dragon, it's going to be very tough times. We're talking about very tough times to live in. Now, we got the other candidate talks about building a wall and keeping illegals out. Now, building a wall, that sounds very divisive, doesn't it? Yes, it does. It sounds terrible, doesn't it? Except one problem. That probably might have been God's plan all along. Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look. Ezekiel 22, verses 23 to 30. Let's read what it says. Starting in verse 23. Again the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, say to the land, you are a land who has not been cleansed or reigned or in the day of wrath. There is a conspiracy of her princes within her, like the roaring lion tearing its prey. They devour people, take treasures and precious things, and make nasty widows within her. Her priests do violence to my law and profane my holy things. They do not distinguish between the holy and the common. They teach that there is no difference between the unclean and the clean, and they shut their eyes to the keeping of the Sabbath, so that I am profaned among them. Her officials within her are like wolves tearing their prey, and they will kill people to make unjust gain. Her prophets whitewash the deeds, for them false visions and lying divinations. They say, this is what the sovereign Lord says, when the Lord has not spoken, the people of the land practice extortion, commit robbery, and they oppress the poor and needy, mistreat the foreigner, denying them justice. Now, that exactly sounds like what's going on in America. God gets taken out of a lot of things. They try to do everything they can to remove God from everything. The Ten Commandments gets removed. We can't even say Merry Christmas anymore. And, things that God said, like God clearly defined what marriage was, and, this is not a hatred towards gays or anything, but God clearly defined marriage as one man and one woman, and we're redefining God. We're normalizing things that God has called sin. And look at all these. Roe versus Wade, that was a total violation of God's law. Thou shalt not kill. You cannot. So that was all the way through verse 29 in Ezekiel. Now, let's read what verse 30 says, because at that point, God's talking about Israel, and he's talking about a defiled land. Now, let's read what it says starting in verse 30. I looked for someone among them who would build up a wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land, so I would not have to destroy it. But I found no one. Oh, wait a minute. What does that say again? I'm looking for someone who would build up the wall. Wait a minute. Does that sound familiar? And stand before me in the gap. See? On behalf of the land, that I would not destroy it. And this candidate is definitely willing to stand up in the gap, because he may be a billionaire and he earned his money in the private sector. He's not taking a salary when it comes to this job here. He's not taking a salary, so he's doing nothing but standing in the gap, for the nation. And yes, that's his whole thing. Build a wall. Build a wall. That's what he says. And so that's what God said in that verse, is I'm looking for someone to build the wall. But I can't find it. He couldn't find anybody. Well, looks like we found our guy for America. Can we not make the same mistake that Israel made back in those days and not let us be destroyed because we couldn't find a guy? If we have the guy to build that wall, why would we not take advantage of it? And it's also, I believe it's absolutely not a coincidence at all that his name is Trump. Because look at one verse I want to share with you, another verse I want to share with you is 1 Corinthians 15, verses 51 to 52. Let's see what it says. Listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed in a flash, in the twinkling of the eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised, the imperishable, and we will be changed. Think about that, the last trumpet. Trumpet. When he announced that he was running for president, everything changed. Everything. This was supposed to be Hillary versus Jeb Bush. The primaries was just going to be pretty much a ceremony, an anointing, and then we all know it was going to be Hillary that was going to win, and but he came in and he just changed the game. And he went through 16 very qualified people very, very quick. And then now, look at him now. Now they thought, oh, Hillary was unbeatable, but he's tied. And I believe he is going to win because I believe God's hand is on him. I believe God's hand is on this, And also, one last part of the Bible I want to share is, I'm not going to read anything. I'm just going to tell you about Isaiah 45. Isaiah 45, and understand that the number 45 is significant because the next president is number 45. And what happened in Isaiah 45 was when God anointed Cyrus to restore Israel. Now let's think about Cyrus for a second. He was a man who was very arrogant. He was really full of himself, very narcissistic. His mouth got him in trouble all the time. He was very cocky and boastful. And he was not a prototypical man of God. In fact, he wasn't even, at the time it was the Jews, because this was before the time of Jesus, but he was not a Jew at all. He was really outside the kingdom. But he was a great leader. He was an exceptional leader. He was able to get people to follow him. And he had a determination that no one else had. And why would God choose him as the one to anoint or the one to restore Israel? I don't know. I can't ask God that question. But perhaps it's because God saw that even though he wasn't of the kingdom, he's probably the only one that can do what he needed to be done. And doesn't this guy sound an awful lot like Trump, Cyrus? And what's really fascinating about this story, too, is that Cyrus, after he was anointed by God to be the guy to restore, he gave his people a very specific command. And that command was, build a wall. Build a wall. So, you take what you do, you take what you want with this word. You take what you want with it. The fact of the matter is, we got two candidates here. One speaks for globalization, which is what it says in the book of Revelations, that will bring the Antichrist. And I don't know, that's going to happen eventually. That is going to happen eventually. We all got to be prepared for it. We all understand that. But I would like there to be one more harvest before the end times. And so what I believe is, yes, I believe God's hand is on a certain candidate that wants to make America great again. I believe God's hand is absolutely on that. But I also believe that God gave us free will. And we have to choose. Are we going to choose prosperity, or are we going to choose judgment? See, this election isn't about politics. It isn't even about Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. It really isn't. It's about a harvest or a judgment. Trump and Clinton are just pawns. And I'm choosing to harvest. Okay? I just am. I'm choosing to harvest. Because I do believe that harvest is through the man that God has anointed, and his name is Trump. Because, one last thing I want to say about Trump. Yeah, he's brash, and Jesus was brash. I'm certainly not comparing Trump to Jesus.